Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about navigating the difficult relationship. From simple disagreements to emotionally abusive behaviors, you deserve respect and kindness. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to another episode of Love and Abuse. I am glad that you are here. I'm glad there are resources out here like this for you. That sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, but really there are many resources out there, especially nowadays, about emotionally abusive behaviors and what to look for, how to deal with them. And this is my part in this entire world of difficult relationships in helping you trying to figure things out and get through these challenges. And today's a very interesting one. In my personal opinion, it's very interesting because I've been thinking about how emotional abuse and the behaviors act like an infection. There are 4 stages to an infection, and I'm going to use the context of infection for the content of this episode because I was able to look at the 4 stages and realize that it's so close on how emotionally abusive behaviors affect the person that gets into a relationship with somebody who does these things. So I'm going to go over these 4 stages and explain. It doesn't sound very exciting, I know, but I'm going to explain it in a way that if you've been through the initial stages, you're going to relate. You're going to understand what I'm talking about, and you'll get it as I go along. But I'm going to go through my notes here and come back and forth in between. The first stage is the incubation period. This is the period between exposure to the infectious agent and the appearance of first symptoms. During this stage, individuals may not realize they're infected because they're asymptomatic. Now let's look at emotional abuse. In emotional abuse, the incubation period is the point at which you allow someone into your life. And that doesn't mean I'm blaming you for this. This is what happens. We meet someone and we allow them into our life. If they're an emotionally abusive person, there are virtually no signs of abusive behavior except for possibly a few orange flags, but maybe none at all. So at the very beginning of any type of relationship with an emotionally abusive person, there may be no signs, or at least the signs aren't indicative of emotionally abusive behavior as far as you know. However, since we're comparing this to an infection, we're at the first stage of exposure to abusive behavior. The first stage is often filled with kindness, generosity, support, sometimes lots of gifts and compliments. These are gift bombing and love bombing. At this point, you don't know you're infected. In fact, everything seems pretty darn good at this stage. They appear to be showing up as everything you love and everything you want. Like I said, the first stage is often filled with kindness and generosity and support and sometimes lots of gifts and compliments. And that all feels so good. So the word incubate means to provide the right conditions for a process or reaction to develop. So in the context of the beginning of an emotionally abusive relationship, incubation cannot occur without the right conditions. And the ideal condition would involve the abusive person to find someone who is not only kind, caring, and supportive, but is also willing to be the first to admit they are wrong and take responsibility for things that maybe aren't their fault at all. These are the types of people that tend to love unconditionally, and they rarely look for faults in others. The ideal person for them is someone who thinks less about their own boundaries and more about the boundaries of others. They are also more likely to accept that they perhaps could be mistaken and that the other person couldn't possibly have done something bad. The ideal victim is usually one who isn't willing to see the faults in someone else because they've been brought up to believe you should always see the good in other people. I mean, these are all fantastic qualities, and they're also an environment that can be used for an abusive person to take advantage of a person like this. So I would not say to get rid of any of these qualities if that's you, but I would also say to develop some other qualities that protect you from the behaviors and the people that don't have your best interest in mind. So the incubation period is the ideal environment for an infection to thrive. Now, the second stage of an infection is the prodromal stage. I think I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not, but the prodromal stage is when the initial symptoms of the infection start to appear. These symptoms are often vague and nonspecific, such as a mild fever, fatigue, or muscle aches, and they don't yet indicate the nature of the illness. This stage serves as a precursor to more severe symptoms and can vary in length depending on the infection. In the context of emotional abuse, this is when the victim of emotionally abusive behavior starts to feel uncertain about things. They feel bad because they believe that they might have hurt the other person in some way, or they think they did something wrong, and the other person even supports that same belief. The abuser supports that the victim must have done something wrong. And going forward, I'm going to use the terms victim and abuser quite a bit just to make it easier to talk about. Doesn't mean I'm trying to label anyone as these terms, but it helps to make the point. So moving forward, the victim thinks that maybe I should have done this, or maybe I misunderstood them, and they'll have all these thoughts of not blaming the other person, but thinking that they themselves aren't thinking straight or seeing things clearly. They don't really want to give into the notion that the other person is just human and completely capable of being hurtful or controlling or whatever. It's at this stage where the symptoms of being in the abusive relationship start to appear. And it's mainly how you feel. Do you feel bad more often now that the relationship has gotten past the honeymoon stage? Do you feel guilty, like you believe you're doing something wrong or just can't get anything right? The prodromal stage of an infection might be a stomachache. The prodromal stage of an emotionally abusive relationship might be confusion, sadness, or guilt. So we've gone through the incubation period where we have an ideal environment for the abuser to step in. Then we have the prodromal stage, which is detecting the symptoms, the initial symptoms of the infection that starts to appear, or in emotionally abusive behavior, those symptoms are basically inside you and coming from them. Inside you, you feel bad, you feel responsible, you feel guilty, you're not sure, you're confused, and out of them you're seeing behaviors and you're not thinking clearly about those behaviors. You're not seeing them. I mean, this is a possibility. There's many ways to look at this, but one of the ways is we look at someone else and we think, well, they're not doing anything wrong because they've not shown me that they're capable of doing anything wrong or hurtful. So it must not be them. That's a symptom, though. We look at that and we say, okay, they are doing things that feel hurtful, they feel disrespectful, or I don't know, it just hurts in some way, or it feels wrong in some way, and I feel like I need to do better. So we're coming back to owning the idea that it could be us causing these problems. The victim of abuse thinks they're causing the problems when the abuser themselves are the ones setting this up. Two more stages. The third stage is the illness stage. With an infection, this stage is characterized by the appearance of more specific symptoms associated with the infection. The severity and duration of the illness stage can vary greatly from mild and self-limiting to severe and life-threatening. The body's immune response is highly active during this period, fighting off the pathogen. Now, the illness stage in the context of emotional abuse is when you're fully in it and you're experiencing the abusive behavior probably on a daily basis. Whether it's in small doses or large ones, I sometimes call emotional abuse a drip feeding of hurtful and controlling behaviors that make you feel worse as time goes on. So think about an untreated infection. That can do the same thing. It can make you feel worse and worse as time goes on. The difference is that some infections may actually kill you, but emotional abuse doesn't stop. It doesn't have an end. It simply continues as long as there is an environment that supports it. That doesn't mean it couldn't turn violent and it could be a lot worse. It could kill you if it turned violent, and hopefully that's not the situation you're in. For the most part, emotionally abusive relationships don't end, they just continue. And that is because there is an environment that the abuse can thrive. And what I mean by thrive is there are no consequences for the behaviors. So any behavior that has no consequences, no accountability, will likely repeat and likely continue repeating over the days, weeks, months, and years. Now we're on stage 4, stage 4 of the infection, which is the convalescence stage. The convalescence stage marks the period of recovery after the acute symptoms of infection have resolved. The duration of this stage can vary, and some individuals may experience lingering symptoms or fatigue as their body continues to recover. It's also possible for some infections to enter a latent phase where the pathogen remains in the body in an inactive state, potentially reactivating later. Now, most of that I can relate to emotionally abusive behavior, even the part where the pathogen remains in the body in an inactive state, potentially reactivating later. And all that means is there may be qualities about you, beautiful qualities, wonderful qualities, that can be taken advantage of. And to be aware that those qualities can be taken advantage of can be very helpful for you to know. For example, something I already mentioned. If you're not willing to see the faults in others, or you're not willing to look at them and say, hey, they make mistakes too, or they're capable of hurting me. They are capable because they're human. If you aren't able to adopt that philosophy, adopt that perspective, and you're only willing to see the positive in others, then you can create the environment where this can be introduced into your life. And I know it sounds like I'm trying to say that you are bringing this into your life and it's your fault. It's not that at all. It's not your fault that you have these amazing qualities that everyone should have, but you do have to be aware that people take advantage of them. People take advantage of qualities like this, which is why you have to be a bit more cognizant that you are this way and there are people that can take advantage of those wonderful qualities about you. Now, I said stage 4 is the convalescent stage, the time of recovery. Well, let's just say that the emotional abuse stops. This actually creates another environment. It's an environment of healing, but also feeling things maybe for the first time. Like perhaps the anger about someone who said they loved you, but they've been hurting you for this long. Or the sadness that you finally feel because so much time has gone by and it didn't have to be this way. You didn't have to feel this way. You didn't have to be suffering this whole time. And especially, maybe you've taken the blame this entire time for what was being done to you when it's not your fault. But the sadness and the anger and other emotions can overwhelm some people because they finally realize that they aren't to blame and they are not the cause of all the difficulties in the relationship. And when they realize that, it can hit them hard. Some will hold a grudge indefinitely. Some will certainly have PTSD for a while, trying to figure out who they are again, or who they were. And where we said the pathogen remains in the body, that's sort of like PTSD. It's in an inactive state until you get triggered again. So something happens that someone does, and it reminds you of what happened in the past, and suddenly you're feeling it again. You're triggered, and you can't stop it, and you don't know how to deal with it. And if you're still with the person that has been abusive and they have stopped the behaviors, you might get upset with them again. And that is certainly a remainder of what happened that is inactive in you, but ready to activate once again because you think the old behaviors, the old patterns will repeat, putting you in a dangerous situation again. Now, in order for convalescence or recovery to occur, the abusive behavior, of course, has to end. But that doesn't always mean the abuser has to stop what they are doing. That sounds a little strange, so let me just follow it up. Sometimes it means you change the environment. You change your responses to their behaviors. And that subsequently will show them that their behaviors don't come with a reward. Now, that doesn't mean I don't want them to stop, and they shouldn't stop. Absolutely, they should stop their behaviors. But sometimes you have to change the environment so their behaviors can't thrive. And This is optional. I'm not saying that you have to do this. I'm not saying that you have to change for anyone. I'm just saying if you want to try working on this relationship in a different way, that this is something that you could try. This is something that will change the environment so that the abuse can't thrive, it can't continue, because there's no, what I'll call, reward system. If the person doing the abusive behavior has a reward system, meaning they're getting what they want, then the behavior will continue. There's no reason for it to stop. But if there is a reason for it to stop, maybe it will. And this is what I'm talking about now. You change your responses to their behaviors. For example, I guess it was about 15 years ago, I used to use the silent treatment to make my partner feel guilty. If I wasn't getting my way, I was like a pouty child who just disappeared emotionally. My partner couldn't figure out where I was. She could see me, but she couldn't connect with me. I withheld love, I withheld affection, attention, and she even tried her best to console me because she thought I was sad or depressed. But what I learned after I healed is that I was doing the silent treatment to get her to feel so bad for me that she would eventually give me what I wanted. I wanted her to feel guilty or wrong, so what I would do is disconnect from her. I knew that if I did that, she would feel alone and unloved. That is something I definitely regret doing, and I'll just say this and I'll bleep it later. It's a shitty thing to do. It's a shitty thing to make someone think that they are unlovable and unworthy. And it's extremely toxic. It's extremely damaging. And if someone is doing that to you, you don't deserve it. After I healed, I vowed never to do that again to anyone. It doesn't mean there aren't times where I have to be silent and process things, but I am not going to use silence and disconnect as an abusive or controlling thing to do to someone that I'm supposed to love. I'm supposed to love this person in my life. Why would I make them feel unlovable and unworthy? So I vowed never again, and I haven't. And I feel really good about that, because the people you love, they're supposed to feel that love. They're supposed to feel like you actually care about them. And that's just one of the many things I learned as I was healing myself. My point is that the environment was ideal for my abusive behavior. She didn't know I was being abusive, and I didn't even know I was being abusive because I didn't know what I know now. But here we are today talking about these behaviors. Hopefully you're getting smarter about what certain people do and what makes them do those things. But we can change the environment so it is not ideal for abusive behavior. We can make the environment intolerable to the emotional infection that some people can inject into us. We can make the environment inhospitable to emotionally abusive behavior. How is that possible? That's a good question. It's very hard to do when you're already emotionally infected. The reason is because the abuse has already flowed through your system, and you've been carrying it with you and making it a part of your everyday life. And in that type of environment where emotional abuse has been present for a long time, every part of your life has been affected. Even when you're alone or you're with your best friend, the other person is still lingering around in your thoughts. You might think, I can't make that decision because that person may not be happy about it. You may have those thoughts when you're trying to decide something, or you want to buy something, or you want to go somewhere. I better not do that because so-and-so will say this. Part of convalescence is the freedom from that kind of thinking. It's when not every thought has the other person in it in some way, causing you to hesitate on doing or saying what you want to do or say. Recovering and healing requires them to not be in your thoughts every single time you have one. The infectious environment can feel like tendrils connected to every part of your life. This is why you can be in what I call a fog the entire time, not being able to think clearly and make decisions with confidence, and this all describes a disempowered state. You are not empowered when you don't even have the confidence to make decisions that are right for you. So what do? Well, you can regain your confidence and make the environment inhospitable to any of these behaviors by remembering that you are worth respecting. You are worth being supported. You have a right to be treated with kindness. And if you don't feel love and support from the other person, what do you feel? What exactly are you feeling if not love and support? And why would it be anything but love and support? And I know we can have challenges, but not every hour of every day. It shouldn't be a daily struggle of always wondering what's going to set them off next. No one deserves to live like that, because that's a volatile environment. And in a volatile environment, you can only thrive if you join the volatility. What does that mean? That means reactive abuse. That means becoming like the abusive person just so you can be heard and understood, as if that's the only language they speak. But of course, who wants to do that? We don't want to have to become abusive just so an abusive person can finally hear us. That's no way to thrive. Some people do thrive in that kind of environment, but the problem is when you thrive in the abusive environment, it almost always has a short lifespan, and it always ends badly. The emotionally abusive relationship is the only infection you can walk away from. And I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm saying that when it comes to infections, emotional abuse is the only one you can separate yourself from. You can walk away. You can say, no more. You can even ask the abuser the question, do you realize that you're hurting me? Or some variation like, do you realize that when you do that, it's disrespectful to me? You can ask that question. You can start the process of making the environment inhospitable to the emotional infection. You can tell them, I will no longer tolerate being treated like that. Or if you can't even figure out how they're treating you or what they're doing to make you feel like you feel, you might just have to say just that. I don't know what's happening. All I know is that whenever we have this conversation, I feel hurt. I feel unloved and unwanted. I feel like you don't even care about me. Sometimes you can't tell what's happening if you've been in it for too long. You've been in that fog and you just can't think clearly. And sometimes you do have to walk away, because after sharing with somebody that they are hurting you, if they choose not to stop doing that and they don't want to change and they don't want to heal, the only person that can create change in a relationship like that is you. That means you can't rely on them to stop. You can only rely on yourself to get away from the cause of your hurt. And I know that that's going to be a very difficult path to follow. That's why I hear from people that have told me that they told their partner or whoever the abusive person in their life is, you either change or I'm leaving. I'll say this, when the abuser hears that, they'll understand it. They will take it seriously. But if they choose not to take it seriously, you have to show them that you're serious. They can take advantage of you not following through. They can watch you say things like, if you don't change, I'll leave. But if you don't actually leave after you say something like that, they may believe that you'll never leave, giving them no incentive to change. Yes, the incentive to change should be their realization that they're hurting you. But if it's not enough for them to finally stop the behaviors, your next steps are to protect yourself and maybe others in your care. Sometimes you have to take a massive leap into the darkness, the unknown, in order to see that there is a place to land safely and there actually is light on the other side. Stay strong and share this with others who might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the MEAN Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook helps you pinpoint exactly what's going on in your relationship, outlining the behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. Take the assessment in the workbook and gain clarity on what your next best steps are. After you purchase the workbook, you'll get an invite to the private peer support group on Facebook. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. If you've discovered that you are doing the hurtful behaviors to someone you care about and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. The course comes with a private online group where I and others will give you direct support. It's time to stop making those you love feel bad. That's healedbeing.com. If you're looking for a safer way to listen to this show where all the titles to the episodes are changed, click the Safe Listening button on the podcast page over at loveandabuse.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Because you are. We'll talk again soon.